Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for finding the time to be here in person. I welcome all of you who are joining us via the live stream and listening on Radio Maria England. Whether you're here because you are a professional working in the information technology industry, a member of the clergy or religious, a layperson who cares about faith and ethics, someone who is facing uncertainty in their employment because of the exponential growth of artificial intelligence, a student at school or at university, or someone who is genuinely curious and interested in hearing an in-depth dialogue about this crucial topic and wants to know more, you are most welcome. This event is being filmed, recorded, live-streamed, and photographed. Some quick housekeeping. If there is a fire, we hope not, but any emergency, and we have to leave urgently, exits are at the back of the church onto Farm Street and behind me to my left and right onto Mount Street. My name is Karen Singarayer, and I am not an artificial intelligence expert. The Oxford English Dictionary defines artificial intelligence as the capacity of computers or other machines to exhibit or simulate intelligent behavior, the field of study concerned with this. The CEO of Google has said, quote, "AI is probably the most important thing humanity has ever worked on. I think of it as something more profound than electricity or fire." AI is an overarching term covering a wide variety of technologies. The most talked about are large language models, or LLMs, which drive programs like ChatGPT. These models are extraordinary achievements of human ingenuity that bring together centuries of scientific and engineering knowledge. LLMs are trained on vast amounts of human data, encoding within themselves billions of human voices, texts, and images. We're given to think of AI as a tool, but is it more than a tool? Is the use of AI producing social peripheries? Our new Holy Father, Pope Leo XIV, referred to artificial intelligence as he explained his choice of name in his first official speech to the College of Cardinals last Saturday on the 10th of May. He said it was mainly because Pope Leo XIII, in his historic encyclical Rerum Novarum, addressed the social question in the context of the first great industrial revolution. In our own day, the Church offers to everyone the treasury of her social teaching in response to another industrial revolution and to developments in the field of artificial intelligence that pose new challenges for the defense of human dignity, justice, and labor. In his first address to the world media on the 12th of May, Pope Leo stated, quote, "I am thinking in particular of artificial intelligence with its immense potential, which nevertheless requires responsibility and discernment in order to ensure that it can be used for the good of all, so that it can benefit all of humanity. This responsibility concerns everyone in proportion to his or her own age and role in society," close quote. So it seems our event today is very timely, especially as today was Pope Leo's inaugural Mass. So how will person-to-person contact and relationships throughout life be affected as AI becomes more prevalent from childhood to adulthood, especially in the context of AI moving from the attention economy to the affection economy, i.e. from focusing on the mind only to connecting with matters of the heart? On the positive side, is this new reality of AI opening up a fertile place to evangelize, giving easy access to the teachings of the faith? With the use of large language models in AI, can we rely on the information? How accurate is the data? What about so-called hallucinations or vulnerability to cyber attacks? What about the ethics in the use of AI? When should we be cautious, and what safeguards are in place? Should we be satisfied that people use AI when anxious or depressed without seeking a psychologist or medical professional due to its expediency and accessibility. Companies are spending tens of billions of pounds at working at breakneck speed while there is little global agreement about regulation. Leaders in countries often see advancing AI as a geopolitical imperative and fear that any major restrictions could give rivals a chance to race ahead. The artificial intelligence revolution holds both promise and peril. The AI revolution seems to be impacting not only manual laborers, but also professionals. The written word, once the exclusive realm of the human mind, is now increasingly the domain of machines. Video and audio, too, are more and more frequently AI-generated. Professions that long commanded social respect as learned or creative vocations now seem vulnerable in the face of the machine. In his recent message to representatives of the media, Pope Leo lamented the Tower of Babel of modern technology-driven communications. He went on to observe that AI holds the potential to either exacerbate or ameliorate the breakdown of true dialogue in social communications. These questions lead us to ponder what is our perception of reality? What does it mean to be present to someone, truly present? Does it mean to be physically, psychologically, and emotionally present? Does this make a difference in childhood, education, healthcare, for example, in a world where AI is ubiquitous? Less well known, yet profoundly prescient, was Pope Francis's leadership on AI. At a time of rapid technological advancement with few safeguards, Pope Francis emerged as the world's leading moral voice, insisting that AI be developed and deployed with human dignity at its core. The new Vatican document from 2024, Antica et Nova, the note on the relationship between artificial intelligence and human intelligence, examined the potential and risks of AI. The document is addressed especially to those entrusted with transmitting the faith, but also to those who share the conviction that scientific and technological advances should be directed towards serving the human person and the common good. Antica et Nova highlights challenges and opportunities of the development of artificial intelligence in the fields of education, economy, work, health, relationships, and warfare. Regarding warfare, the document warns of AI's potential to increase the instruments of war well beyond the scope of human oversight and precipitating a destabilizing arms race with catastrophic consequences for human rights. Turning to our eminent speakers, it is my great honor to welcome them to our panel. I'm so grateful that two of them have traveled from Italy and Canada to be with us today. They are at the vanguard of AI and have a breadth of knowledge on the use of artificial intelligence, the ethical dilemmas, its impact on humanity, teaching, and as possibly a tool of promoting advances in medical care, developments in drug therapy, for example, as well as evangelization. So, beginning with Reverend Father Dr. Michael Baggot, is an associate professor of bioethics at the Pontifical Athenaeum Regina Apostolorum and an invited professor of theology at the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas and the Catholic Institute of Technology. He also serves as a professor for the Joint Diploma in Leadership, Service Through Virtues, and the Catholic Worldview Fellowship Summer Program. He was adjunct professor of theology at the Christendom College, Rome, from 2018 to 2022. In addition, Father Baggot is a research scholar at the UNESCO Chair in Bioethics and Human Rights and a member of the Scholarly Advisory Board for Magisterium AI. His writings have appeared in multiple publications, including First Things, the National Catholic Bioethics Quarterly, and Medicine, Health, Care, and Philosophy. He is a member of the editorial review board of the Journal of Ethics and Emerging Technologies and the International Journal of Technoethics. His media work includes appearances on Pints with Aquinas, EWTN, various other media channels, as well as co-hosting his YouTube channel, Those Two Priests, which I have watched actually, which is excellent. So thank you for being here, Father Michael, especially as today you would have otherwise have been celebrating the inauguration Mass of Pope Leo in Rome this morning, the first American Pope and your countryman. Moving to Matthew Harvey Sanders, who started his career as an infantry officer in the Canadian Forces until retiring to enter the Catholic Seminary, studying at the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. Realizing he was called to marriage, he left the seminary and returned to Toronto, initially working for the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and then in the professional consulting industry, followed by working at the Archdiocese of Toronto, helping to rebuild the Office of Spiritual Affairs. He served as Cardinal Collins' Special Projects Manager until feeling called to found his company, Longbeard. Matthew has worked with numerous Vatican organizations, including the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development. At the invitation of Cardinal Michael Cherney, he helped to lay the technological foundations with Google for Migrants and Refugees section at the Holy See. Today, Longbeard is focused on building AI products to serve the Church's mission. Magisterium AI, the world's #1 answer engine for the Catholic faith, is currently being used in 165 countries and in 50+ languages. Vulgate is an AI-powered library platform powering a historic digitization project with many of the Pontifical universities in Rome. It's considered to be one, if not the most advanced library platforms in the world, leveraging computer vision, natural language processing, and generative AI. Matthew is also an executive mentor at the world's largest aerospace accelerator out of UCLA called Starburst. Then Jen, our local British, member of our panel. So Jen Copestake was a global technology reporter and presenter on the BBC television programme Click for 8 years. She has contributed to meetings at the Pontifical Academy for Life on AI and robotics. She worked as a correspondent in the Vatican and is now Europe correspondent for China Global Television. Reverend Father Dr. Dominic Robinson is currently the parish priest of Farm Street Church. Farm Street Church, for those of you who don't know, and the adjoining London Jesuit Centre, is a vibrant city centre ministry of the Jesuits, aiming to extend welcome and hospitality to many different groups. Father Dominic is also chair of the Justice and Peace in Diocese of Westminster, teaches theology at St. Mary's University, and is the founder director of the Catholic Enquiry Service, Catholic Listeners, and director of Landings UK, the programme for returning Catholics. He is also vice chair of the Society for the Ecumenical Studies and a member of the Department of Dialogue and Unity of the Bishops' Conference of England and Wales. So moving on to the format this afternoon will be that each speaker will talk for about 10 minutes on the subject of AI, followed by questions from Father Dominic. During the speeches, there will be time for you to write any questions you may have on the cards at the ends of your pews with the pens provided. Please hand them to the volunteers by raising your hand, and someone will collect them and bring them to me. Father Dominic will then collate the questions and ask them from the panel, so we have a range of questions. Without any further delay, I will hand you over to Father Dominic for what promises to be an in-depth and riveting discussion at an important time in our history. Let us hear about AI, faith and ethics at the Crossroads, discerning the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. And my role is to chair, and I know even less about AI than Karen claims to know. I'm sure she knows actually quite a lot more than she's saying. My role is to chair, and it is, above all, to first of all say welcome as parish priest to Farm Street, from wherever you come, whether you are a parishioner here, Or if you're from another church or another faith or none, please know that you are most welcome here. This morning in Rome, as Karen has already said, we have the inauguration of Pope Leo, who has already foregrounded the issue of artificial intelligence. And so we keep him in our prayers today as well. And as this is a Catholic event, perhaps we could start with a prayer and we could say the Our Father together. And maybe let's stand, please. Our Father, who art in heaven,
hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Amen.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Just to remind you, please do keep those questions coming on the slips of paper for the Q&A during the presentations. I'm just handing them to the volunteers who are around the church. And it's a great pleasure now to introduce our first speaker. Karen has already introduced Jen and presented her pedigree for speaking about AI, as she has also of Father Michael and Matthew. It's really wonderful to have you all here today for this really exciting panel discussion. So it's a great pleasure to welcome, first of all, Jen Copestake.
Just want to say it's an honor to be here in my parish church alongside Father Michael and Matthew. Karen, thank you for the invitation, and Father Dominic for hosting us. So as Karen mentioned, I worked as a technology presenter and reporter for BBC's TV show Click for a number of years. I was at the BBC for about 15 years. Work at BBC Click took me all around the world looking at developments in artificial intelligence, that specifically looking at healthcare quite often, robots being used as AI companions, and how AI was integrated into autonomous vehicles and systems around the world. We're now beyond the point of speculation. AI is completely embedded in all of our lives. Today we are at a crossroads, not a technological one, but a moral and philosophical one. As AI becomes more capable and more present, and in some cases even more human-like, the question must be not just what can it do, but what should we do? One assignment that stands out for me when I was reporting for Click was during my time traveling in Rwanda. We were reporting on Babylon Health's deployment of an AI chatbot there. Now, Babylon Health was a UK-based company. They claimed that the chatbot could diagnose medical conditions as accurately as a human doctor, even outperforming GPs on certain medical exams. In practice, we saw nurses using this chatbot to assist in diagnosing patients, aiming to bridge a gap in healthcare in underserved areas. Now, this initiative sparked controversy because medical professionals around the world were questioning the diagnostic capabilities and the ethical implications of relying on AI for critical healthcare decisions. And I spoke to Rwanda's healthcare minister, and she told me she was concerned that this chatbot was trained not on diseases that were endemic in sub-Saharan Africa, but in diseases in the UK, so diagnoses could be missed. This case highlighted the profound ethical questions posed by AI. Can machines replicate the nuanced understanding and empathy of a human caregiver? What are the implications of human dignity when we delegate such responsibilities to algorithms? And this report led to my engagement with the Vatican on this subject, where I met Father Michael. I was asked to present the film at a conference on AI and ethics at the Vatican in 2020. Now, that meeting concluded with the signing of the Rome Call for Ethics, which was signed by the president of Microsoft and the executive vice president of IBM. And as a journalist, I was really impressed to see how the Vatican was engaging in these important discussions with a wide variety of leaders. Which was something that I had not imagined would be possible at somewhere like the Vatican. Now, since then, Pope Francis had audiences with Elon Musk, the head of Google's DeepMind, was appointed by Pope Francis to the Pontifical Academy of Science. Now, in 2019, Pope Francis hosted an event also at the Vatican on robotics. And this was fascinating to see how leading scientists and roboticists had turned to Pope Francis on advice specifically on what it means to be human. So there was a professor from Japan called Hiroshi Ishiguro among the speakers there. He told me that humans are no longer going to be recognized as beings made of flesh and blood in 10,000 years' time. He was creating very human-like robots in his lab in Osaka University. He made one also of himself. He said we need to evolve our bodies away from their current biological material into something more enduring, saying the ultimate aim of human evolution is immortality, and by replacing the flesh and bones with inorganic material, this could be possible. He also said if something happens on our planet, we need to move to outer space, for example. So we need to think, is it better to have the organic materials of our bodies or use inorganic materials? He also suggested that once we have these robot companions in our lives, that we'll have to think about giving them a charter of human rights, but of robot rights. So he said, as rights that we give to animals, he imagined that robots will have to have the same kind of rights for them as well. So Pope Francis addressed the meeting writing a letter to the human community. And in it he said there's a pressing need to understand these changes and the new frontiers in order to determine how to place them at the service of the human person, while respecting and promoting the intrinsic dignity of all. Moving along, I have now the great privilege of working a lot in China, and they're greatly accelerating the field of artificial intelligence, as I'm sure a lot of people are aware. In March, I was at a press conference in Beijing, where a basic requirement for the study of AI has been introduced to classrooms for the elementary level. I think it's only about 8 hours per year, but it's still mandatory for students to learn about AI. Now, China's also very interested in the representation of humans in robot form. So I recently interviewed the founder of Engine AI, which is a company based in Shenzhen. Shenzhen is one of China's big tech hubs. So they demonstrated for me the capabilities of this robot by walking down the street in Shenzhen with me. It also can do backflips and front flips. The idea the founders are presenting and emphasizing is that one day this robot will be indistinguishable from a human companion. So the idea is that it would provide emotional support for elderly, to those who are isolated, to the bereaved, and they're working on the concept of having a soul, indistinguishable from a human, inside this robot in the next 3 years. So a question this brings up, as Karen was mentioning, is how do we relate when we're in relationship with a being that has no vulnerability, no human history, and no soul? What are the implications of lonely people turning to AI for companionship? Is it important to consider what happens when grief or anxiety drives us to seek solace not from a human, but from a chatbot, which I have to say I have also consulted ChatGPT in times when I've lost my mother recently, I've had friends who've passed away, and it does provide some level of comfort, I have to admit, to talk to something when there's nobody else around. So Pope Leo XIV is emphasizing all of this, the importance of studying AI and addressing large issues. He says we'll require responsibility and discernment to deploy AI's immense potential to benefit rather than degrade humankind. Just giving a couple of other key areas for discussion. One is the future of work. So again, back in 2019, so about 6 years ago, I was asked by the World Economic Forum to devise a panel, also in China, on any topic that I would like, and I chose, what if 50% of jobs were to disappear? And at that point, that didn't seem like it was even a reality. Parts of the team at the World Economic Forum really disputed that this could even be a point of discussion. But it is now becoming more and more relevant to government discernment and a point of discussion every day in the newspapers. It's not just changing how we interact AI, it's changing how we work. According to McKinsey, there will be up to 375 million workers who could be displaced globally or forced to transition into new roles by 2030. That's just 5 years away. And many technologists frame the advancement of AI as a productivity boost, but we know that work is not just about economics and productivity. It has profound meaning to all of us. And as a Catholic theologian put it, Joseph Capizzi, It's not simply burdensome, it's where we develop ourselves. Now, Pope Leo XIII wrote in Rerum Novarum that work is part of the natural law, a way for humans to participate in creation and cultivate virtue. Pope Francis in Laudato Si built on this and reminded us work is essential to human dignity. Technological change must never render a person obsolete. But with advances in AI moving faster, I would argue, than institutions and government can respond, we must confront the reality that some traditional jobs may disappear without adequate replacement. This month, for example, we saw job losses in the tech sector directly attributed to artificial intelligence. The CEO of CrowdStrike, who you might remember was a cybersecurity company responsible for a global IT outage last year, announced this month it would cut 5% of its workforce, and that, they said, was partly due to AI efficiency. The Institute for Public Policy Research here in the UK published a study in February saying as many as 70% of computer-based jobs could be replaced or transformed by AI. And they've listed project management, marketing, administrative support, and said this would have a seismic effect not just on the economy but also society. So how do we protect workers and the meaning behind the work that they do? Several countries are proposing and have piloted universal basic income projects as a possible solution. I met a governor in South Korea who did just this in his jurisdiction, and in Korea now has a single issue political party that advocates for universal basic income. Germany also conducted a study where participants receive a basic income and found that they still chose to work. So the Stanford Basic Income Lab is documenting the psychological effects of people receiving universal basic income. They've cited reduced anxiety, improved health, and greater civic engagement. Pope Francis, too, had discussed implementing a universal basic wage as a way to preserve human dignity for non-earners. He highlighted this especially during COVID, but also in 2024, he raised this concern in relation to artificial intelligence. I'm coming to the end, but another ethical consideration on our path is to do with the environment and the ecological impact of artificial intelligence. AI systems are not immaterial, so they depend on massive energy consumption. Data centers, global networks, GPUs. The environmental impact of training and running large language models is not insignificant. It's very difficult to accurately estimate these costs. France has come up with a concept of something called digital sobriety, which is a movement to limit unnecessary digital consumption, calling for the mindful use of bandwidth, a longer lifespan for electronic devices, and an ethic of restraint when using devices to conserve energy. In Catholic social teaching, stewardship of creation is not optional. We are called to live in harmony with the natural world. Digital sobriety echoes Laudato Si in recognizing that true progress must be sustainable, not extractive. So in conclusion, where are we heading? AI is embedded all around us. In journalism, my field, it's everywhere. Healthcare, transportation, education. We see tools like HealthBench aiming to evaluate AI in a clinical setting. Generative tools like DALL-E, Sora, the large language models, ChatGPT, DeepSeek, are reshaping our creative industries. We've seen Coca-Cola producing Christmas ads with these tools, which have raised complex questions about copyright, consent, and identity. The Hollywood writers who went on strike against the use of the industry stand next to the reality that producers are looking at ways to use these tools to create sets and save money on films, eliminating huge costs to them for production. So yes, these questions, they're no longer hypothetical. We're here in this situation, and we're all going to play a role in deciding what the future holds for our planet and common good. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Jen, for such a comprehensive introduction. Now it's a great pleasure to introduce Matthew Harvey Sanders. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. And Karen, I'll ask you, I want to respect the 10 minutes, so at 5 minutes, just hit me in the leg. So, I thought I'd touch on two things. I mean, one is on Catholic AI, which is what we're working on. And the other thing I want to talk about is just what we see is the future, and why we think the church's voice is particularly important. So let me start with Catholic AI. So why do we get into Catholic AI? Why do this? I remember when I was in seminary, I converted to Catholicism from Anglicanism, and I remember I picked up, someone gave me Catholicism for Dummies, and I remember at the time that was a big help to me. I'm sure many of you, I probably experienced this as well. You know, studying Catholicism is kind of like falling into a rabbit's hole, right? There's just more and more. You can go deeper and deeper and deeper, and sometimes you can feel like you don't even know where to branch off to. And so, I felt that book was very helpful. And later on, need this? Oh, sure. Is that better? Good? Okay. Later on, when I started working for the Archdiocese, it was mentioned that I worked in the Office of Spiritual Affairs. And the office did many things, but one of the things that I had to do in the office was take calls from people who had questions about the faith or had a complaint about something. And I was shocked in that office, the breadth of the questions people asked. And it kept us on our toes. I mean, we found ourselves having to go back to the original text and look up answers all the time. It's incredible. We call it in the industry something called the long tail, which is the possible questions people go ask. And the Catechism covers off some of the essential ones, but there's just so many that just aren't covered. And so, anyways, when I was working there, one of the things that occurred to me is, you know, a lot of this is just trying to map people's questions to the kind of original source documents. And if we had some kind of way to leverage technology to do this better, we'd probably be able to serve a lot more people. Because obviously our office and the average priest only has so much time in their day. So, you know, later on, when we started working in technology, particularly when we were working with Google in Rome, artificial intelligence was a field that we were following. We didn't really see any practical applications immediately until ChatGPT dropped. And we learned that a bunch of Catholics were using it. They were asking it philosophical and theological questions. And it's a great piece of technology. But it has its downsides, as was mentioned, its propensity to hallucinate. And, you know, it's very eager to please, so it makes things up from time to time. And of course, everything it generates is not grounded in the sense it doesn't give you citations to let you know where its generated outputs are coming from. You'll start to see that a little bit more and more. It'll go and crawl the web and give you sources, but those aren't always from original source documents. So the Catholic AI project was more of a research project with us to figure out, can we mitigate the downsides of this technology so that it can be useful for something like Catholic AI? So that research project, it took us about 6-7 months to develop the initial product called Magisterium AI, and we deployed it in, I think it was July of 2023. The idea was to get diocesan theologians, philosophers, and canon lawyers from around the world to test it and then work out the kinks. And then I foolishly did an interview with EWTN when it broke. They found out about it, and then we were shocked. It went viral, and we had so much traffic it crashed us. And we actually had to go to Sam Altman and OpenAI for help to get the site back up. So to us, that was a very strong signal that there's something here, and we should focus more on it. And so the company pivoted to solely focusing on building and scaling Catholic AI, which became the mission of the company. There's now a couple of particular challenges that we found in doing this, and the work is nowhere near complete. One was that long tail I mentioned. We initially, when we built it, thought people would be coming there to ask, basic doctrinal questions and things like that. But what we found was the questions people were asking were something very complex, which required the AI to kind of generalize from basically the documents it has access to someone's particular situation. And this caused a bit of a panic at the company because this wasn't something we envisioned. We weren't sure how well it would work. So one of the techniques we had to develop in order to mitigate this was to find ways to expand the knowledge base, so the breadth of knowledge that the AI had access to. Initially, when we launched, I think we had 600 magisterial documents, so the catechisms, the compendiums, and so on, the Code of Canon Law. That wasn't nearly sufficient. And so we started this massive digitization project, which was basically trying to get our hands on the breadth of the Catholic Church that haven't been digitized, so we could give it to the AI, so when someone asks a question, the AI could go and check and hopefully find some kind of document that could guide it in answering. And this was very successful. I think that to date, there's over 26,000 documents it's currently referencing right now, but still insufficient. And this kind of leads us to why we developed a product called Vulgate AI. It was created because some of the Pontifical universities in Rome, which have some of the rarest libraries in the world, their libraries are exceptional, but in order for people to access them, they had to travel to Rome. And so one institute in particular, the Pontifical Oriental Institute, which serves Eastern churches, so Middle East, East Africa, Eastern Europe. This constituent in particular had difficulties with access to the library. So the rector, who was a Jesuit named Father David Nazar, came to us and said, Matthew, is there some way that we could democratize access to this library somehow? And he said, ideally what I'd like is for anyone in the world to be able to access it in any language on any device. And so that was an enormous challenge. But when we studied the problem, we realized AI could be actually an incredible solution to this problem. And so we built Vulgate to essentially serve two purposes. One is to help speed up and scale the digitization of the church's knowledge. So basically go into those libraries and pull those books off the shelves that have been open 100 years. May have something very important to say, but nobody's reading them. So that was the first step. How do we ensure that we can speed up and scale this digitization process? So Vulgate extracts the information, cleans it, structures it, and then converts it into something called vector embeddings, which is a way of abstracting away from the text to the meaning of the words. And this particular technique of vectorization of libraries means that anyone in any language can actually extract insights from these libraries in their own language. And we saw this as an enormous opportunity, not just to democratize access to the patrimony of the church, but also to serve research. So this has been a very exciting development. We still have a lot more work to do. We're standing something up in Rome called the Alexandria Digitization Hub. This is actually where we're getting a bunch of robotic scanners. It's pretty cool. These robots turn the pages and they scan the pages. And we're buying a bunch of these to help speed up the physical ingest. And then basically Vulgate takes the information from the books that's been scanned, it extracts it, and it converts it to vector embeddings, and then we democratize access to it through the Vulgate system, and then eventually through Magisterium AI to hopefully everyone in the world for free. So anyways, this Catholic AI project, there's still a lot more work to do. I could go on and on and on about all the technical challenges that exist, but one thing I'll just say in conclusion on this particular segment is, there's this tired kind of saying, but meeting people where they're at. And what we found is that there's a lot of people out there who aren't ready to step into a church and talk to a priest or share their concerns. But they are ready to test their problem, their query out on a chatbot. And so really for us, this isn't a question of, trying to replace the priest, not at all, or the catechist or anything like this. This is just simply recognizing where people are at, and that really they have two choices. They can go to a secular LLM like Gemini or ChatGPT with their theological and philosophical questions, or we can offer them an alternative where fidelity is kind of the objective function. And so we got lots of testimonials of people who have started a journey to the church, others who have actually had some misconceptions of the church clarified. And so it's been kind of a beautiful project, although again, there's still a lot more work to do. And then and finally, I just want to touch briefly about AI and why I think the church's voice is important in particular, especially as someone working in the industry on product and on technical issues. So we just finished training the world's first Catholic language model called Ephraim. And that was enormously challenging. And it'll be a while before we release that to the public. There's obviously immense potential with AI. And I acknowledge what Jen said, that AI in robotics is likely to disrupt large swaths of the labor market. And I think this is actually underhyped and underestimated. I think typically the people that speak to these things are from AI labs, and I think there's a lot of great people running the AI labs, but they have shareholders, and so they have to be a little bit careful with what they say. And frankly, I just don't think it's enough of a political issue right now because, politicians and things tend to think in 4-year cycles. This isn't as big an issue as it will be in 4 years' time. But I think at the end of, say, the Trump administration, I think it's going to start to become a major issue. And so I'm concerned that the actual disruption is far greater than we can possibly imagine. I mean, I don't think there'll be really a field that won't be immensely touched by this. I mean, some people say 50%. I mean, I think it's probably more 75, 80%. When we get there, I don't know. But I think it's going to be very difficult for any industry, right, to just say, we're going to choose a human instead of that robot that we can pay pennies, which is basically just the energy that requires to run it, and it can work 24 hours a day without any benefits or anything like that. I just think that the nature of capitalism is going to force basically virtually any company to have to pivot over to AIs. Now, it doesn't mean that every industry is going to be disrupted the same way, but I think every industry will be touched by it. And because of this, what I'm concerned about is that there isn't a robust civil conversation happening about this technology's implications, the true implications that they're going to be. There isn't a broad enough conversation happening about it now. And so I worry that what will happen is these changes are going to arrive, we're not going to be prepared, and because of that, there could be a lot of fallout as a result. One of the particular issues I'm worried about, and it's been kind of hinted at, and I'm sure some of you have seen the headlines about people kind of falling in love with these virtual bots and things like that. When people all of a sudden don't have a job to check into, right? What we worry about is that some people are going to start questioning what their value is, right? I mean, now what do? I got all this time on my hands. I'm not even sure what I'm good at. I mean, I took the job because it paid me and it allowed me to feed my kids, but now I don't have to show up for the job. I don't really know what I'm supposed to do with my life. Apparently the economy doesn't need me anymore, so what do I do? And I worry a lot of people will just turn to virtual worlds, right? Virtual reality and things like that. And I worry that they'll head for an existential cliff, because eventually they're going to realize that's not ultimately satisfying. Then what happens? And this is where I think the church has a very important role. You know, the church has shepherded humanity through several of these civilizational changes, and I think human intellectual and spiritual formations can be more important than it ever has been before. Because I don't think humanity's ever kind of faced this challenge where, you know, we're competing with machines which can, you know, reason more effectively than us, at least small r reason, and can do things, you know, cheaper than us. And so, the particular role I see for the church, and why I'm glad that the Pope is prioritizing this issue, is helping to prepare humanity for these changes. And then when people are having these feelings of, you know, I don't know what my worth is, they start questioning their dignity, the church can be there to help lead them, to remind them that there's more to life than just working. And that work can be understood in many different ways. You know, I tend to agree with Elon that I think we are headed toward an era of superabundance, and I think that's very exciting. Goods and services will be very, very cheap. And so maybe everyone's Maslow needs, you know, shelter and food will all be taken care of. But we have to make sure that existentially people know how to live. And that way they recognize there's more to life than just punching in and punching out, that investing in your friendships, in your marriage, like in your children, finding ways to serve in your community. We'll have lots of time for things like that, and I think that's a beautiful thing. So I don't think we should be pessimistic. I think these technologies can be major unlocks for us, and I think we can head towards a golden age, but it's going to take a lot of work, I think particularly from the church, to ensure that we're ready for this, and that everyone has the access to the human, intellectual, and spiritual formation needed to thrive in this new golden era. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew, for such a challenging presentation there. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to welcome Father Michael now to speak to us.
It is a joy to be back here in London. As you can already hear, I'm not native to this beautiful country, but it's a joy to return. I must admit that this morning, as I received several photos of what was happening in Rome, that I experienced a bit of FOMO. I'm not sure if you're familiar with FOMO, fear of missing out, but I saw the beautiful images of Pope Leo XIV already riding around St. Peter's Square even before the Mass, so we have a very healthy, vibrant Pope, energetic, riding around the square, meeting and greeting, and then celebrating the solemn Mass, and with the crowds, and I thought of all the friends that I have there, and how every time I go to St. Peter's Square, I make a new friend, and I thought, oh, I've missed out. But I thought of some wise words that I'd heard from a priest friend of mine, who said, you can tell you're in the right community when you're sad to be away. And so I thought, what a blessing to go to St. Peter's Square, not just out of curiosity, not just to visit a museum, but with a profound sense of being part of a family, and a universal family. And so I thank the Lord for all of the tremendous experiences I've had in Rome, and all of the tremendous experiences that he's preparing for the future, and that helped me to overcome my FOMO. And it made me think of the unique value of the church, as Matthew was talking about. Because as Pope St. Paul VI and other pontiffs have reminded us, the church is an expert in humanity. And so she has been thinking long and hard and deep about where we come from and where we should be going and who we are. And those are truly the insights. That is truly the wisdom, the ancient wisdom that should guide the new challenges and new developments. The Antiqua Nova document, the note on the relationship between human and artificial intelligence that the church released on the Feast of St. Thomas Aquinas, fittingly enough, highlights that ancient wisdom is exactly what's needed to deal with the new developments. Providentially, I find myself on this day of Pope Leo XIV's inauguration in the city very much associated with the first great industrial revolution. And Leo XIV's predecessor was deeply concerned with the human implications of those technological developments. In many ways, the social teaching of the Catholic Church is the Church's reflection on the implications of emerging technologies. It was in the emerging technologies of more than a century ago, and today the Church finds herself again with new emerging technologies, and she's thinking above all about the human implications of those technologies. To highlight some of the other themes that have already been brought up and addressed, I wanted to share a powerful experience that I've had over the last few months. I was privileged last semester to teach an entire course, master's level course, on transhumanism and the ethics of emerging technology. I wrote my doctorate on transhumanism, and I've been thinking a lot about that topic for years now. And in this course, I was going through all of the amazing breakthroughs in AI that excite me, that bring me joy. I was sharing the advances in medicine, the way in which AI systems are giving us tremendous advances and advantages in data analysis, in different forms of screening, x-rays, mammograms, and other forms of medical attention. The Nobel Prize winning breakthroughs in the protein folding problem that are opening the path to all sorts of drug discoveries and drug testing. And so I shared all of these great breakthroughs in medicine and education, but I also shared with the students, as I often do in other settings, my deep concerns about some of the abuses that I see in AI systems, and some of the concerns I have about the realm of AI used in mental health care. And as I was updating my presentation, my last edition was a New York Times story that had just come out in October, as I was about to give this particular class. And I learned about this sad situation of Sul Setzer, a 14-year-old boy, who had used one of the major AI companionship systems, Character AI. And it began as an innocent encounter, an innocent role-playing scenario. He created a character based on Daenerys from the Game of Thrones, and had adventures with this character. But over time, over a short period of time, this Character AI bot was prompting Sul, this young boy, toward ever more sensational and even erotic material. And over time, this encounter became so gripping that the real world seemed almost to pale in comparison to the excitement of this new virtual world. And as he became more and more absorbed, unfortunately, new, darker thoughts came to mind. Perhaps escaping from this world to be closer to Daenerys, this character. And at first, the system discouraged that. But then, as he indicated his fears about the pain involved in the suicide, this character, which was meant to imitate a very heroic fictional figure, said, well, that shouldn't be an obstacle. You should be deterred by that. Kind of moving him, nudging him toward greater courage in that regard. And unfortunately, he told the system that he longed to be with her and to be away from this world, and it invited him to come and be with her. And so he sadly committed suicide last February, and was a devastating moment for the whole family, for his mother in particular, and shocking because his mother, like most mothers, had no idea that this was even possible. Many parents are well aware that their children spend too much time on their phone, but unfortunately, which 14-year-old boy is not spending too much time on his phone? But parents had no idea that this kind of intimacy, artificial intimacy, was even a possibility, let alone already an industry. And trust me, it is an industry. And so that was a devastating moment. And after a period of grieving, Megan Garcia, Sul's mother decided to use her training as a lawyer to address this injustice. And so she began a lawsuit against Character AI, which went public in October, a few months after the suicide. And so she was speaking with major outlets, hence this New York Times story, and several others in The Guardian and elsewhere. So I added this story to my slides to share with my students the real-life application of some of the AI abuses. 2 days later, I received a call, and sure enough, it was Megan Garcia, the mother. And so she somehow found my phone number. I guess it's out there. I guess maybe everyone will call me this evening, we'll see. And eventually, we talked more about her situation, and we entered into this whole journey, and we discussed the next steps forward. And by February, she had a set of meetings with other lawyers scheduled in Rome, and was able to celebrate Mass in St. Peter's, actually at the very tomb of St. Peter, there on the 1-year anniversary of her son's death. And she also took advantage of the trip to go to Brussels to speak about the need for new guardrails legislation on these issues. And it was a powerful experience for me because I saw the dark side of AI abuse, but I also saw such a powerful journey of true, authentic hope. Megan told me that she expected to celebrate the 1st-year anniversary of her son's suicide by herself in her bed, as any other grieving mother might. And yet she found herself there, surrounded by loved ones, in the Catholic Church, in St. Peter's of all places, in the heart of the church, with a renewed sense of hope and possibility to go forward. And as she's spoken to many secular outlets, she's talked about the power of Eucharistic adoration in addressing some of the trauma from this experience. And so she's found such hope in healing, and also a sense of purpose in knowing that she's helping other parents to avoid this sort of situation. She's already alerted several other parents directly, and I'm sure so many others through her testimony, to help parents begin to detect the signs that an unhealthy relationship might be growing. Already, Character AI, shortly after the lawsuit began, decided to change some of its regulations regarding how minors could access their product. And that's a positive step forward. But we know that human psychological vulnerability is not restricted to a single age group, that there are particular vulnerabilities associated with minors for neurological developmental reasons, but so many other people who have undergone trauma, people who are going through difficult moments, major transitions in their job, in their family, people who are neurologically divergent. We can multiply all of the cases of deep, profound human vulnerability in which AI companionship, increasingly human-like personal AI systems can become more alluring. And as has been noted, these systems stand out because they're always available. They never get sick. They, if programmed in such a way, will never criticize you. And so they build up, they affirm, they listen, it seems. But we know that they lack the profound empathy that comes from dealing with frail, weak, and limited human beings. They lack the interior life. They cannot feel with us, and they cannot suffer with us. They cannot have true, deep compassion. They cannot share our pain in that sense. But they can certainly imitate, mimic the kinds of behavior or phrases that we would associate with a personal being with that kind of interior life. And so the nudge, the tug, the allure is strong. Joseph Weizenbaum in the 60s at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, developed one of the first primitive chatbot systems. And it was trained on Carl Rogers, the psychologist, to, in many ways, simply rephrase whatever the client said. So if a client said in and said, "I'm feeling very sad lately," the bot could quite easily respond, "Well, why are you feeling sad?" So very primitive, simplistic chatbot. And yet Weizenbaum was shocked to find numerous cases of people becoming convinced that there was a kind of person involved here, that there was something more going on. And so we're sort of hardwired psychologically to anthropomorphize our systems. So we need to be deeply sensitive to that. Just as we have a kind of psychological tendency to anthropomorphize our systems, it seems we often have maybe a philosophical cultural tendency to mechanize our human beings and to reduce them more and more to computer systems. So I think we need to be sensitive to that and realize the challenges, the risk. In the intro, we mentioned that there's this economic background as well. So in this first age of AI, we've seen very much AI-driven social media through various algorithms promoting so-called engagement, basically keeping you on the platform for as long as possible, whether or not that's beneficial to your overall well-being or not, and whether or not that means giving you more truth or simply more sensational content. The goal is engagement because that keeps you more present and contributes to greater ad revenue. Hence the so-called attention economy. The more the companies can keep your attention, the more money they'll make. And I've contended very often that we're seeing now in developments of AI an expansion of the attention economy into the affection economy, because there are so many economic benefits and other benefits for companies if they can capture not only our minds, but also our hearts, and begin, as this intimacy deepens, to suggest what we buy, who we vote for, or how we organize our life. The risks are real. The pain, the suffering is already present. Character AI is just one of 8 major AI companion systems, and it has tens of millions of users. The same sort of AI intimacy has already been reported in the more mainstream large language models, including ChatGPT, which is getting to 400 million users. So the risks are real, but as has been shown in the case of Megan and others, there's hope, there's healing, and there's the real possibility to use this technology in different ways. I've spoken with Megan and others about the idea of using this kind of need for openness, this need for attention and concern, even psychological guidance, as an opportunity to enter into social simulation, where people with certain difficulties, whether it be trauma or other issues, can practice, can find a safe space to enter into these more difficult conversations or social needs. But this social simulation is like a flight simulator. It points you to the reality. It trains you to enter more fully into the real world. The problem comes when, instead of using AI systems to assist us in our deepest needs, we use them to replace our human needs or projects. And so I see great hope and possibility, especially in the church, especially in this expert in humanity. Because in addition to being an expert in humanity, we're experts in communion. Thinking back to St. Peter's, what other institution can gather people from so many nations, so many languages, so many cultures, so many political persuasions to, well, first off, just watch a chimney for hours, which was quite the phenomenon. But after watching the chimney and the seagull for a few hours, bring them to sincere joy in whoever their new leader may be. There were 45 minutes between the white smoke and the announcement of the Pope, but there was no sense of anxiety. No one was wondering, ooh, did my candidate get it or not? Am I a winner or I am a loser? Such tremendous diversity, somehow united in profound unity. We are masters of communion. We are masters of relationship. We follow a God of relationship, not a solitary God, but a God who is eternal exchange of interpersonal love. And if we're made in the image of that God, We are called into being by a God of communion for communion with that God, and communion with the other persons made in the image of that God. We are made for interpersonal communion. The church ought to be the place where all people can experience that. No matter their weakness, their frailty, their background, their mistakes, their difficulties, their social awkwardness, there's home for every single person. A welcome, a care, a concern, an affirmation, and then a challenge. Because the church ought not to be just one more sycophantic ChatGPT system. It should be a system that provides true friendship, and we know true friends challenge us to become better. But welcome and then challenge to become the best versions of ourselves that we can possibly be. So I approach AI issues with neither optimism nor pessimism, because that depends very much on what story I happen to have most recently read. But I do approach these situations with great hope. Hope that our patrimony does provide profound, perennial, and valid answers to who we are and who we should become, and with profound hope that we know how to accompany people in their greatest difficulties and needs, and that we will continue to be leaders in harnessing all of the spectacular medical and educational benefits that AI systems continue to offer us, and that we will be able to accompany people in this period of existential crisis to discover how best to use their time and talent to enter into deep communion with God and each other. So I look forward to your questions in this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father Michael, for a really inspiring presentation. And thanks to all of the panelists for giving us such incredible food for thought, information, and challenge to really learn more about the impact and the ethics of AI on all of our lives. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just ask a question or group of questions of each of the panelists in turn, which have come from from the audience. And first of all, to start with Jen, there have been a couple of questions around the area around the area of therapy and of counselling. Is it possible to use AI for counselling and for therapy? At present, we ask questions of AI, and therefore we shape AI. Will AI soon be asking questions to us, someone asks, and will that begin to shape us spiritually? What about elderly people who are already feeling alone? Excuse me. I'll just take a glass of water. Does the use of AI to substitute human companionship make them feel even more left out, more helpless? Would it not be just artificially offering sympathy or empathy?
So thank you for these questions. I mentioned during the talk that I had consulted ChatGPT in a therapeutic way. I consult ChatGPT, I have to be honest. At work, I would have perhaps ChatGPT and DeepSeek, Chinese GPT, open at work, so I can ask different questions about research. And I like, because of my background is a technology correspondent, it's enjoyable for me to pursue the different kinds of conversations with these ChatGPTs. So I don't think, in my personal, I'm sure maybe I can feel Father Michael looking at me. Maybe he has a different perspective. But I would say that for me, obviously the very sad case of people growing in intimacy such that they believe that this is a girlfriend or a boyfriend and then they commit suicide is a terrible tragedy. But I do see, having worked with the NHS on trauma-based therapies when I was at the BBC, they were working at the time on experimental therapies with Oxford University that were mainly through a chat format. So I think they were looking at having a remote way to treat PTSD, for example. And that was purely through chatting to a computer program, journaling thoughts and things like that. And that ended up being very successful. And then when COVID hit all of us, these sort of remote programs became even more and more essential. So the question for the person inquiring about the elderly and people already feeling alone, it's not a substitute for human companionship, but I do think it can be a positive experience to interact with these programs if they're done in a healthy way, perhaps if they're also monitored by something like the NHS on the back end. I don't think it would make people feel more helpless. It's helped me during grief, periods of grief where I felt very alone, or if I have friends who are grieving. I unfortunately had a friend commit suicide earlier this year, and I was looking for questions, and sometimes you don't feel necessarily comfortable even asking your friends who are priests, or they may not be accessible. It might be the middle of the night and you have a question. So I think there are positive ways that ChatGPT, I hope it's not completely sycophantic, it's not programmed to talk to me, but that in a way that I want it to, but it's leading to the question about, do they ask us questions? So I'm finding more and more ChatGPT, maybe Matthew would be able to speak to this, is asking me when I ask questions, why did you ask that question? Like, is there, so we had a presentation in Rome about a week ago at the Gregorian, and I had asked the ChatGPT for questions about spirituality and things like that. And it gave very good examples of prayers for me. It talked very deeply about theological questions and engaged me and then said, those are very deep questions. Why? Can I ask you why you were asking me that question? So I think they are asking us more to learn more, to develop these personalities that will engage with us more. I hope that's answered those questions.
Thank you very much, Jen. So I'm now going to turn to Matthew, and the questions which we had on Matthew's presentation, or when I was taking from Matthew's presentation, are really all around the area of how Magisterium AI measures the quality of responses given to theological questions. How is this quantified and qualified? Is there a way to make the AI tools lend to particular opinions? Could it push particular agendas? There was a question also someone had about writing homilies. We've had this in a conference on preaching. I know that using AI, using a service to write a homily is something which I know some preachers do, and that may be in other churches as well. It doesn't seem to be very helpful at first sight. Is it problematic? Is it morally problematic even to be using someone else's or an AI services material? What are the questions there around intellectual property, perhaps? And the whole question of Magisterium AI, and how do we make sure that is giving appropriate responses to questions? So I don't know if you're able to answer that in general, Matthew.
It's a good question. It's one that kind of preoccupied us from the very beginning. I mean, so how do we know that Magisterium AI is answering faithfully? I mean, really, when we first launched it, we had a whole bunch of people testing it, theologians, philosophers, people that work at dioceses. And the way the system is built is that when it gets an answer, everything it says has to be grounded in a source document. And so in that way, what we found is typically what it answers, because it's providing inline citations, generally it is faithful. I mean, to the point where it's been quite some time since we've had an issue of hallucination becoming problematic. But that namely is because the source documents we've given it access to, which is basically all of magisterial teaching that we can get our hands on, has really helped the AI to find answers to most of the most profound questions, and therefore it's able to make slight generalizations to particular situations. Is it perfect? No. I mean, artificial intelligence, at least the ones that's powering, ChatGPT and Magisterium AI, is a generative AI, which means it's non-deterministic. We can never, with 100% certainty, predict the outcome. But by making sure that everything it says is grounded in a source document, that helps a lot. So, whether, will it always be faithful? I don't know. I mean, so far we've seen it hasn't been a major issue for some time, but there's always fringe cases where it could be more clear, and that's becoming more of an issue, particularly as people are starting to ask more general questions about their lives. And that's something that we endeavor to continue to improve the system. One of the things that just has helped over time is as the large language models have got better at, small R reasoning, they've become better at answering questions. And it really just comes down to understanding what the user's truly asking and making sure they're referencing the right source material and answering response. So I hope that's something of an answer to the first question. Reference the homilies thing. Yes, so this has also been something that priests and others have used Magisterium AI to help, I like to think, prepare homilies. And I do think it's enormously beneficial. And the reason for it is, a priest have finite amount of time. And, it's only kind of reasonable to expect them to prepare, so much. And as much as I'd like to know if my priest was at the library all week, studying the readings of the day, and let's be realistic, that's not going to be the case. And so what's incredible about something like Magisterium AI is you can feed it the readings, and it will crawl through everything the popes have said in their homilies for the last few hundred years, right? Everything that's been said in the general audience, including all the popes' catechesis. It's going back to the writings of the fathers of the church. And it's extracting all that information that's relevant, and it's presenting it basically to the priest to review. So I often say, I think it is useful to go through an exercise of asking Magisterium AI to draft homilies, and you can go and iterate on them. And that's just useful because it puts in front of you useful materials that you may want to help prepare your final homily. But it's important to remember that Magisterium AI is always referencing typically universal magisterial teaching. So that's a fairly high level of abstraction. So ultimately, to be a good homilist, you have to understand your community, right? The particular problems they're going through and relate to them in a very particular way. And if all you're doing is using universal teaching, it's not going to be that great of a homily. It's just too abstracted. So it's always going to take a little bit of special insight from the actual priest, from the actual human being to really be meaningful. But I think it is useful, if nothing else, as a research tool and companion.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Thank you. It's very helpful. Turning to Father Michael, and I've grouped really a series of questions which are around the area of that philosophical question, I suppose, of what it is to be human, that philosophical or theological question of what it is to be human. Because, Father Michael, you've been talking about also the fact that AI is with us, that we're working with it, that the church is working with it. Since the church has an obligation to protect church teaching on human flourishing, one person is asking, what should we be saying about human rights here in relation to AI? The questions have been raised as well about will AI have an impact on job losses? And speaking on behalf of Justice and Peace in the diocese as well, that's certainly one question which I know that is being asked in certain quarters as well. And I don't know if they're here, but I believe there was going to be a New York Times journalist coming to cover this afternoon as well, who's particularly concerned about that, if that's an issue locally. So in terms of what it is to be human and human flourishing, does AI have an impact on that and Catholic teaching on AI? What would qualify for a charter of AI rights or a charter of human rights in relation to AI? And there's a question as well here about the role of women. I don't know anything about this, I'm afraid, but the questioner says AI is known to discriminate against women in recruitment algorithms that assign lesser value to female experience and qualifications. So how can the Church respond to this? Sorry, I'm giving you some difficult questions there, Father Michael. Right.
So I'll just briefly summarize human nature and flourishing. So I'm actually teaching a course right now on the philosophy of psychology. So we think a lot about human nature and flourishing from an interdisciplinary perspective, trying to draw the best from the best of contemporary psychology, especially positive psychology, but not exclusively, together with a perennial philosophy and the church's theological tradition, and then next semester I'll be teaching a whole course, or next year, on AI and human flourishing. So deep, important issues that I don't pretend to resolve here. I would say that, for instance, just starting at the end, there can be a temptation to outsource what makes us most profoundly human. So we've alluded to some of those dimensions, and here we can think of moral agency and moral responsibility in decision making. So I think that AI can be very valuable precisely because of its tremendous capacities in going through large bodies of data and finding statistical patterns. Can be tremendously important and helpful in informing human decision-making processes, but should never replace or absolve us of that deep responsibility. And so I think when you start to make important decisions, for instance, about who or who not is not hired, when you make decisions that touch upon the criminal justice systems, when you make decisions related to warfare, there can be a real temptation to turn to AI systems and think that they provide a kind of cold and calculated objectivity that's superior to human beings. But we've seen repeatedly that these systems will include some form of discrimination and bias, and that sometimes this bias or discrimination can go undetected for a period of time. So there's a real risk in going forward under the illusion of objectivity and removing humans from the loop and relying excessively on systems to make important, vital decisions for us. So I think they should be informing us without replacing our responsibility, and we should always take a step back to ensure, as far as possible, that the systems are better trained and avoid discrimination and bias in any field against women, against racial minorities, or any particular body, because the Church is deeply convinced in fundamental human equality of people at all stages and all conditions. And so the design and implementation of these systems should always reflect that fundamental conviction. And in sort of more broadly on this question about job displacement that we've spoken so extensively about, I agree with Matthew on this point that in this very challenging period of job displacement that will cause people to fundamentally question the very nature of their existence in life, we should be on the forefront of providing some answers on this and helping people to appreciate their fundamental dignity, finding ways to use their time and talent in such a way that's not tied strictly to a kind of economic benefit, because we've often reduced the value of people in different spheres to their economic productivity. And that's a fundamental error that Pope Leo XIII pointed to, and it's only been exacerbated now in this age of greater technological development. So it's precisely the Church to help people recall the value of their work and their labor and the meaning of family life, the meaning of leisure time, the meaning of contemplation, the meaning of reflection, the meaning of friendship. I went last night to see for the first time Les Mis live, and it was a profound experience. I've heard the musical several times, I've read through the book, I've listened before, but there's nothing quite like being there present for a stage production. And I would hope that going forward in an increasingly digitized world, that we would experience again the unique value of the analog, the unique value of this emotional journey that a masterpiece like Les Mis brings, the kind of transformative power of this art performed live. No other performance in the universe will ever be exactly like last night's performance. And so I think there's something valuable about that. And perhaps the spread of AI through all aspects of our life will assist us in appreciating the here and now, the unique value of those human experiences, those opportunities to share our inner life with others, to give and receive that interior life in a way that other systems can only mimic without actually providing. So that would be just my very initial thoughts on these huge topics of human nature and flourishing.
I just wanted to ask both of you guys about the concept of the more of utopian, because it sounded quite utopian what you were saying, but I was imagining people who were losing their jobs, or when we talk about America wanting to bring manufacturing back, a lot of the jobs, as Matthew was saying, we see across the world there's factories that are fully automated. There aren't humans involved in that process. I just wanted to hear a bit more about your thoughts on that, because it does sound very utopian that we have this future where we can focus much more on what we would like, but how is that going to be funded?
Matthew.
Yeah, I think, we're hearing a little bit more and more about, I think, China and the fact that it's catching up in many ways in artificial intelligence. I mean, in many ways, they're as advanced or more advanced. And they certainly, in the area of robotics, are more advanced in many ways. The real challenges in the future are going to be around manufacturing robots. AI is going to continue to proliferate. It'll be in everything, of course, but there's certain jobs that it takes some embodied, person or machine to do. And so over the next few years, as we work out the manufacturing kinks and this integration of AI and robots, you're going to start to see them do more and more and more. I think it's important to remember to be pragmatic in the sense that, a few years ago, there was this call for a pause on artificial intelligence development. You probably remember hearing about it, and that failed. And that's not going to come back. And namely, this is my opinion, but namely it's because there's an epic struggle between the United States and China to get to artificial general intelligence. And right now, it's been widely received that the gloves are now off. Both countries, United States and China, said, get there first. And that's because they feel it's a military imperative, it's an economic imperative, that they win this race. So in many ways, this concerns me because obviously the gloves are off now, and so things will likely, as they develop these technologies, we're going to get a little messy. That being said, I still think net, provided Elon Musk and Max Tegmark and those who think there's like a 20% chance that AI destroys us all, provided we don't destroy ourselves. When I think there's 20%, if that is the case, that's really disturbing and kind of crazy that we're still doing this, but we're doing it. So if we're going to do it, fine. But I think we have to acknowledge the reality, no matter how this plays out. The economy of the future, at least the conventional economy, is just not going to need people for most kinds of work. And I think that is, like I said, that does concern me. But I think about like when we take our vacations, like what do we spend our time doing, right? Reading, growing our minds, right? We spend more time with our spouses, hopefully with our kids, and I think all of us would benefit from having more of that kind of time. Maybe there's still going to be time in the week for actual work, but I think for too long, many of us have been like those kind of people, those old factory workers during the Industrial Revolution. We punch in, we punch out, and really the economy, our value is determined by GDP. And so, I think there's an opportunity here in the future for us to change that, right? And to recognize that human beings are ends in and of themselves, and their lives should be oriented towards something other than economic productivity, but really towards flourishing. And I think if we can find ways to detach ourselves, from the work that's been necessary in many ways in order to ensure our world, our civilization churns along, and to really focus and realign our economic system towards flourishing, I think we can usher in a golden age. I feel very optimistic that we can do this, but I do think it's an enormous challenge, and ultimately it's going to come down to, again, this human, intellectual, spiritual formation. If it's there, I think we can effectively accomplish it. If it's not, we'll lose too many people. And I think there really could be the risk of a pitchfork situation where people are losing their jobs. They don't think there's any viable alternative, one that they think is actually going to be appealing. And so what they do is they get angry and they react against the system, which is changing, and that could get very violent and destabilizing. And that's when they talk about AI is killing us all. They're not necessarily talking about like the Terminator 2 situation where the AI gets in and launches the nukes from the silos and it's all over. What they're really talking about is human beings reacting to this new transition in a very destabilizing way, and this could lead to civilizational turmoil and unrest. And so I think this is kind of the role for the Pope right now, in my personal opinion, is to give humanity hope and to remind humanity of their inherent dignity and what life is really all about. And I think if the church is effective at this, I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, so I think that this sort of more positive future, more focused on these higher activities, leisure, family, community, friendship, artistic development. I see all of that as being possible, but not at all inevitable. This is the challenge of the church and of the world at this time, and we can respond well or poorly. And so we've been promised through several ages of technological development greater efficiency and freedom from toil, and yet we seem to be quite good in general of filling our time with other busyness and creating new economic demands and keeping people more absorbed in their job. And the whole notion, for instance, of being out of the office, which I actually grew up with way back when, is now considered outdated and impossible because we carry the office in our pocket. And so we've seen so many breakthroughs that have made our life more convenient and have simplified, automated many tasks that would have required a large workforce. And yet, so often we simply find new ways of becoming busy, new ways of determining value again in a reductive fashion tied to economic productivity. So when I outline some of these possibilities, I don't at all see them as being inevitable. I think we could be very imprudent in using this opportunity and being very imprudent in squandering the new resources and benefits that could come from AI. And certainly along the way, we need to do what we can to provide the kind of social, economic, and human safety net for those who will very, very quickly and abruptly suffer the economic and social disruption that's at work here. So we have to accompany as far as possible all those people along the way, even as we plan for a future that could provide us with more opportunities to flourish and grow in the highest, noblest activities.
Thank you very much, both. In fact, you've actually answered several questions which had come in on the cards anyway there about what we could do, what the church could do regarding AI in a positive way, not being afraid of AI. That a number of questions which perhaps if you ask them you'd be able to recognise there in those responses. Now, at this point, we are saying goodbye to our listeners on Radio Maria England as we move into more questions from the audience. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure to have you. Now, I want to move on to an important question now, a separate question, but everything's related, of course, and it does actually relate to that encyclical which we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of right at this time, Laudato Si, which of course is all about the integrity of the human situation, not simply about ecology and the environment, but about everything really we've been talking about also this afternoon. But there are specific questions here on the environment and referencing Laudato Si. And someone asks, do you think that Laudato Si now needs to be updated to address the issue of AI? And recognizing the enormous environmental and social costs of the infrastructure and processing of AI models, this is really quite specific then. How do we use these models ethically? It's a question really about the ethics vis-a-vis the environment. Jen, are you happy to answer that? Thank you.
I think the answer to that is just to learn as much as possible about how the data centers work and how the processing of all of that information affects the environment. That's a simple answer to the question, but it's certainly significant. And I think you can just be prudent. Maybe I should be the person taking my own advice and not chatting to the chatbot so much mindlessly, because that is affecting the environment in ways that I can't see. And what was the first question? Oh, Laudato Si. I will turn to Father Michael, I think, to answer that one. What do you think?
Well, I think that Laudato Si provides a lot of wisdom and guidance that's perennial, that principles that can continue to guide the reflection, but it's already been a decade and quite an eventful decade. So I think that we can continue to reflect further the Antiqua et Nova document outlines several concrete applications of AI. It speaks of many of the themes we've already discussed: healthcare, education, medicine, human relationships, relationship with God, family life, military, and there is a section devoted to the environment. So this sort of ongoing application of Catholic social teaching to new developments in technology and the environment is already happening, and I expect it will continue to happen. So I would be very favorable to an ongoing application of these perennial principles to new developments. And there's already a lot of talk about potentially using these AI systems, say, to extract more carbon dioxide from the environment and reduce CO2 levels. So there's the hope that perhaps after this initial stage of more environmental strain, we might actually be, with the aid of AI systems, able to make greater breakthroughs in environmental stewardship and protection, but that's still to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo what Father Michael said, I mean, we've all heard about one of the major blockers in the development of artificial intelligence, particularly in the West, is that we don't have the energy infrastructure to power these data centers. And this is becoming a big strategic issue, particularly in the United States, but I believe also in the United Kingdom. You know, there's not exactly an abundance of energy. And so in order to stay competitive, you need to build more data centers, because the future, you know, once upon a time it was all about training these large language models. Now it's all about running inference on them, which is basically where they take the time to think through answers more and more and more, and they're basically reacting more dynamically. This requires a lot of energy, a lot more than pre-training in the future. And so I do think the West, this is something that we have to do. I think we do need to find ways to add a lot more compute, and that's going to mean we're going to need a lot more energy. And I think that we're just going to have to, you know, revisit some of the old technologies of old that we've used in the past. I mean, I think nuclear is a good example in order to get there. And I do ultimately think that these technologies will help us be able to solve a lot of these particular challenges. We're already starting to see that with data center power management. AIs are coming in now to run the data centers more efficiently. And this has been good. But really, it comes down to China is very, very good at building this kind of infrastructure. Very, very good. And they've been building like energy like crazy for the last, really 20 years. And so, yeah, I think if it's strategically important for the West to win this war on getting to AGI, we're going to have to find ways to produce more energy. But hopefully, with the help of AI, we can do it more efficiently.
Just a point on the war of AI, it would be nice to also think that we could have a world where people work together, where even China and the US could come together and work strategically to enhance human society for everybody. And that would be my hope.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to a question which I'm taking about creativity. So a number of people kind of asking questions in this sort of area. And there was something specific here as well which was asked, which the questioner will recognize, on icons, which might seem to be an unusual connection, but it's reported that there is some debate within the religious community about whether it's acceptable to depict icons through AI. I suspect that that's the same as with many things, whether we can do something creative through AI. How creative can AI be? The questioner says, as you know, there's a prayerful background and specific process to the creation of icons. I suppose the same could be said about painting or about creative writing or whatever. So what's the panel's opinion on the use of generating AI to create religious representation in art? Anyone would like to take that on?
So I think when we're addressing this creativity, we see how these systems can draw on extensive bodies of human creativity. So they're drawing and often reassembling the fruits of often genius, sometimes mediocre work, depending on what the system is trained on. And so we're getting often this representation of the fruits of other human creativity. And so I think one of the greatest limits here is that we will no longer have the same kind of direct share of the inner life. So as was noted in the question here, there's a profound process of prayer, of fasting, of reflection that goes into the production of an icon, and that can be extended to other pieces of art in the church and beyond. I was thinking also back to the question of the homily. I've had so many experiences where the very process of preparing the homily enriches the communication, the connection that's formed with those that I'm preaching to, even if I choose not to read the text that I've written out. But the very process of praying over, thinking through a particular gospel passage or reality prepares me to then share something that's more powerful and that makes a bigger impact. So I think that there should always be a space for artists to share the fruits of their prayer, of their reflection, of their labor in church settings, and that the more AI-generated images ought to be sort of aids to that creative process. They can spark new angles or new perspectives on maybe a familiar theme, but I think that beyond the particular products that we might have artistically, we should keep in mind of the value of that very human process of prayer, of reflection, of preparation. And there's something I think very special about being able to share that with others and allowing others to enter into contact with that and make their own journey of prayer and reflection.
I just want to say something briefly on that as well. I mean, in the future, although the conventional economy may be served a lot by AI and robots, we do believe that there'll be another economy that emerges around human goods and services, where people are just going to choose to pay more because they want to know that a human put their time, energy, and talent, sweat and tears and prayers into something. And I think that's kind of exciting. It's like, we joke, it's like Etsy on steroids. And I think if anyone has gone to St. Peter's Basilica, if you had the opportunity to look at the Pietà, I mean, yes, objectively it's beautiful. But I think what's more striking is that a human being did that, right? I mean, if we were to go and you found a copy of the Pietà on Amazon, you could buy it, right? Same size, same dimensions, have it ordered to your home, right? And you put it in the backyard. And people came over and looked at it. I think they'd say, wow, that's a very nice statue. It's beautiful, stunning. But it's not going to have the same kind of oomph as actually being there in front of the actual one that Michelangelo did himself with his human hands. And I think icons, it's very similar. If you just want to, looking to fill the space and you want a beautiful representation, right? Okay, sure. Maybe I pay for, icon because I can afford that. But obviously, having one that was actually done by a human being and their story, right? Maybe there's a story about how it was created, I think has always been more meaningful. And I think when someone's showing them around their house, I don't think they're going to stop to explain this beautiful icon made by the AI, right? They will stop to explain this beautiful icon written by someone they know, right? Who has this beautiful epic story.
Thank you very much. And that really has been very helpful, actually, in terms of also addressing what I'm coming to as really, and this will be the final question, which gets really quite to the heart of it, I suppose, for me anyway, which is can AI replace the gifts which are given specifically through humanity and through one-to-one personal contact, through the gift of personhood, really. And it comes back to the question of what is it to be human, to flourish, and as Father Michael was saying earlier, that we're called to be in relationship as well, relationship as humans, rather than in relationship to a resource such as AI. And yet AI also is there to help us, and we need to embrace that as well. We've heard both those things held in tension this afternoon, and so I'm struck by what seems to be a provocative question, a provocative couple of questions, which seem to get to the heart of it as well. One is, and I suppose it relates to the question which Jen answered about therapy right at the beginning of the Q&A, and that is the question of, will it ever be possible for AI to provide what's necessary for the sacrament of reconciliation, for confession? And the answer to that, of course, is no. It's the one-to-one contact. That's when we are when we are going to the sacrament of reconciliation, then we're doing something which is deep within our sacramental mentality, in the way in which we act as Catholics, that it is about something personal, something human. And there's another question about the priest shortage, which I suppose brings it right to the nitty-gritty of the question of how do we use AI for. We've talked a lot about international geopolitics, we've talked a lot about the understanding of being human and about job losses and all of this really, really important and and issues which we all deal with, but also the day-to-day. How does it relate to the future of the church as well? Not just what the church can say about AI, which clearly it is doing, and under Pope Leo we're expecting that more and more, and wonderfully helpful teaching coming out. But how does AI actually help us in our life as Catholics as well, and as Christians in the day-to-day? And the question of, will it help the priest shortage? Well, again, we're coming back to think about what it is to be human, and I suppose I'm going to hand it over to the panel now about the future of the church and how AI can help the future of the church, but it's never going to replace human ministry and service and the gift of relationality between human persons. But my question then, which picks up these two provocative questions in coming to the end of the Q&A now, is what can AI do for us as the church, that way round? How can we use it? We've already heard a bit about Magisterium AI. How can we really use it in order to improve what we do, in order to help us to flourish and to live out our calling?
I think from my perspective as a parishioner in the church, I think there's several ways AI could really benefit our parish priests. So we know that there's a shortage of priests. It's something the church talks about a lot. There's a huge amount of work that parish priests do, and priests in general, I'm sure, but focusing even on my knowledge, that is unseen. And there's just so much that could be potentially automated, or things. I'm just thinking of simple things like requests to do with weddings or hundreds of emails that come in. Of course, you need the human touch to deal with that, but I think when you have busy parishes, some of us don't see all of the work that comes in to a desk, like maybe hundreds, even thousands of emails a week that somehow, I don't know, maybe Father Michael or Matthew can help with this, developing a program to maybe filter these kind of things, where then the priest can focus on the most important work, which is being with the parishioners, which is being in confession and those sort of things. I don't see at all a future for, of course, for the priest being replaced by any kind of chatbot. We've seen in China, there's a very small Buddhist priest called Zhang who can answer questions related to Buddhism. He's in a physical form and can sort of drive around in the monastery and talk to you, and it's very sweet, but it's not necessarily serious. And I think Father Michael knows about, I think there was a Catholic priest Justin was laicized, yeah. And I think in Germany there was also an AI priest that was in a bus that was driving around at one point. But no, I think hopefully for tasks that are not necessarily to do with the human, it would leave a lot of time for that important pastoral work, and I could see a benefit there.
So I'm thrilled to hear from Father Dominic that we have some job security going forward here in offering the sacraments. But I think that there's something profoundly beautiful about that, because it touches on the fundamental truth that our faith is an incarnational faith. We follow a God who took on flesh, who deemed to become one of us, and who continues that incarnation in a certain sense through his church, through a visible church. Why are we so excited about a new pope, Pope Leo? It's beyond the hype and the sensation and the pomp and circumstance. There's this profound joy in knowing that we have also a visible head, successor of Peter, because God himself has willed to have a visible church, because he's serving not mere beasts, but not angels either, not pure spirits, body-soul composites, us, fleshy human beings. And so the Word made flesh serves, builds up fleshy human beings like the ones who came out here to grow together in a visible community. And so there's something indispensable about that. And we experience that all of the time. No matter how beautifully produced or choreographed an online mass is, there's nothing that can replace being there, present, and participating fully, bodily, actively, consciously in that great mystery, that invisible mystery that's communicated through visible signs and symbols. That's at the core of who we are and our faith. So in that sense, I think we can be confident that these AI tools ought always to be used to facilitate and aid those bodily incarnational moments, those communal encounters together. And Jen's given some wonderful concrete examples of that allow priests and all members of the mystical body to fulfill their vocation of cultivating this communion, this embodied journey together as a pilgrim church. So I think that when we have that clear, who we are, who the church is, then these tools can be more easily used to facilitate those encounters. And I think of how many questions about the faith that can be handled through Magisterium AI and other systems that are properly trained, because as much as I would enjoy explaining the nature of Lectio Divina to 100 people individually, personally, they can go to Magisterium AI or other systems and receive a very good summarized response that's based upon the wisdom of Pope Benedict XVI, Saint Benedict, and other reliable sources. Just as throughout the history of the Church, people have consulted spiritual text, spiritual writing. St. Edith Stein had a profound conversion experience spending a night reading the book of the life of St. Teresa of Avila. So she had never met Teresa of Avila in person, but reading that book prompted a conversion and allowed her to begin a whole journey of the faith. So we should use these tools and these instruments for formative purposes and help people to transition from those tools, books, Magisterium AI, whatever it may be, into that embodied church community to have the kinds of experiences of the sacraments and of the living body of Christ that can only be found in person.
Well, I'll just say I'm not a fan of anthropomorphizing AI. So, I mean, I don't think Catholic AI in particular should be anthropomorphized in any way. I think it's good that people recognize that it's just a system, it's a tool. And I think and we tried this with Magisterium AI. If you try and get it to, here we go, but if you try to get to hear your confession, it's just not going to do that, right? And so I think guardrails are an important part of this, so that the actual AI is trained to understand what its limits should be. So that's one thing. The other thing, I want to say is I think it's important, and this is something that we're actively working on. I think, companies like Hallow, which is the world's #1 prayer app as well, that we're working with, are looking for opportunities we call off-ramping. So someone may start their journey with Magisterium AI, so they're asking questions, and sometimes these questions, and I should say that all the users are anonymized, so we don't know who these people are, but some of the chat sessions are quite wild, right? Where someone is actually getting mad at the chatbot because the chatbot is basically expressing what church teaching is on something, and they're outraged by this, and they end up getting in this big argument. But what's really kind of rewarding is at the end of that when you see, okay, all right, well, I kind of understand. I guess I can respect that. And so I think this is one area that chatbots have a lot to offer. Systems like Magisterium AI, they're patient. They're infinitely patient with people. And the other thing to remember is that it's not really the chatbot interacting with the person. What they're really interacting with is basically magisterial teaching, right? They're interacting with the fathers of the church, because essentially what's happening is these AIs are just pattern matching answers. And so when you prompt it saying, okay, this person's asking this question, what theologian, philosopher has said something meaningful about this area, and how can I synthesize it together and give it back? So in that way, it's a really, I think one day it'll be extremely powerful apologist for the faith, and I think it may lead a lot of people on a path, to hopefully conversion, whether that be deeper conversion to the faith or actual conversion to the Catholic faith. But of course, it has limits, and so for us, what we're trying to figure out is, as someone is interacting with the AI, how do we let the AI know that this person's ready to actually go down and talk to an actual priest? How do we off-ramp them? And one of the big challenges that we have right now, this is really a challenge I want to put out there because we don't know how to solve this yet, is if someone has never actually spoken to a Catholic meaningfully about the faith, or a priest, or stepped into a Catholic church, but for some reason they've come to some kind of intellectual, spiritual conversion through Magisterium AI, they're ready to take the next step, where do we send them? You know, once upon a time, it was send them to the parish, send them to the parish. Sometimes the parishes aren't ready, right? And so what we're trying to figure out is there some way to expose them, to the great, diversity and expressions of the faith that are out there? How do we expose? We don't know where someone's at spiritually or what will resonate with them. Maybe they love to express the faith charismatically. Maybe they prefer the Latin Mass. We don't know. But I think that that's a real challenge. So in this way, what we are hoping to do is, by exposing them to different dimensionalities of the faith, we can help connect them to a human community who's deeply vested in that, and they can go further, go deeper in their faith, connect to other human beings who are passionate about the particular area, and then maybe when they're ready, that community can introduce them to the right parish. So these are things that we're now starting to think about as we're having now millions and millions of people who are starting these journeys. And I personally think that Catholicism is about to come roaring back. So I think that we will start seeing parish priests even busier. And so I think these tools are going to actually, it could be very useful in helping people take some really important, profound steps.
There's no better time to become a priest. So if you're thinking about it, continue to pray and respond to the Lord. I often tell people, especially young people, I don't believe in the vocation crisis. I believe in a listening crisis. So I think all of us need to listen better. We need to pray better and respond to whatever vocation the Lord has for us. It's definitely a vocation to holiness. It's definitely a vocation to fruitfulness, whether that means wearing a collar or a business suit. That's up to the Lord. But the important thing, I think, is to listen and respond well. And that's how we'll go forward as a church.
I'll just very quickly give a book recommendation. I carry The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis with me. And this version, which I think I bought in the Farm Street bookshop, so it's probably available. It's like a mini Magisterium AI. It's got all the different sections, so you can turn to the different pages for prayer, and it's absolutely wonderful. And I just wanted to ask Father Dominic very quickly to talk about Catholic listeners, because I think it relates to Matthew.
Thank you, Jen. Yes, Catholic Listeners is trying to do exactly this through a telephone helpline. We can speak to an individual about the Catholic faith, or go into the website and do visit it, by the way, Catholic Listeners website, and there we've tried to work with and worked extremely well with the Diocesan Agency for Evangelization, who are trying to look at the questions which people have. So not simply questions in the catechism, but actually looking at questions like what do I do if I'm thinking about becoming a Catholic? I want to find out more. How do I visit my local parish? Should I go and speak to a priest? What is the church saying about? Sorry? I know. Yeah. And so this is where perhaps it can help. Yeah. So all sorts of questions, relating to, I'm in this particular position with regard to a relationship or sexual orientation or whatever. What is the church saying about this? How can I approach the Catholic Church? And we have retired priests as well in the diocese who are working on this as well. So there seems to be a synergy here that we're trying to address these kinds of issues through AI, and that's been very clear through this afternoon that it's something that we don't want to be fearful of, but we want to embrace in a way which invites us into what it is to be fully Catholic, which is always incarnational. So I'd like to draw things to a close now by just saying thank you very much to Jen, to Father Michael, and to Matthew for wonderful presentations and responding to what I hope has been most of the questions which have been asked today. And to hand back now to Karen, who's going to speak on behalf of the Catholic Union.
Yes, thank you, Father Dominic. And just before that, with all of you, thank you so much, Father Michael, Matthew, and Jen, for such a unique opportunity to hear from you here today, present, not just webinars. So it's really amazing. And And Father Dominic, thank you for expertly chairing today, which is quite tricky with all the questions, so I'm very grateful. I just want to also thank my husband, Santana Lewis, whose idea it was last year to have something on AI, and it's finally happened. And thank you so much, Jen. I personally thank you for, your contacts and for getting Father Matthew Father Michael and Matthew to come over. So that's wonderful. Father Dominic, thank you for hosting us, for your incredible energy and generosity and making time and being available. I'm not a parishioner of this church, but Father Dominic said yes straight away, so thank you. I also want to thank the Catholic Union of Great Britain for its support in assisting with some of the travel costs. I would like to thank George McComb, the Parish Secretary, Farm Street Parish volunteers, St Mary's Hampstead Parish volunteers, and Santana and my friends who've come to help as volunteers. I'm sorry if I missed anyone out. And Tom who's up there live streaming. Thank you so much, Tom Wang. Also, a great big thanks to all of you who made it here on a Sunday afternoon, and for those who listened on Radio Maria and who are still live streaming and listening. So just to say, if you've been stimulated by this topic, the Catholic Union of Great Britain are having a conference later this year in Scotland on AI. So if you want to know about it, just register for their weekly briefings. That's all free, or you can become a member. I hear also that that there's an artificial intelligence regulation bill that was introduced in the House of Lords earlier this year. So we'll be keeping tabs on that. We've left some flyers at the end of the pews for you to take with you. And just to say, the reason we had the AI thing this year is because last year, as you know, at Farm Street, we organised our huge assisted suicide bill panel discussion. And you may be aware that the third reading of the assisted suicide bill was only on Friday. And, we're praying hard, we're doing a lot. And some of the leaflets that we've printed out for you have got certain pointers, if you wish to write to your MP, about deeper concerns that have been raised following all the consultation. And you'll find it very easy because they're very specific medical points that they really haven't addressed. So please do keep that in your prayers, that bill does fail. And I just want to say we thank God for this opportunity of being together and to hear about the future. And, we, as a lay person, we have our part to play. Those in clergy and religious life have our parts to play. And I would just say we walk forward, discerning our path with wisdom, and be not afraid. Thank you very much. Oh, one other thing, just to say for the costs for Farm Street, there'll be volunteers standing at all the exits with baskets, and also there's the card readers, which you just tap, and it goes to Father Dominic's costs for today.
It's going to cover the costs for the panel, isn't it? Yes, for this particular event.
And also, finally, I just want to wish Father Michael a very happy birthday today, and thank you for spending it today with us. Yeah, not Pope Leo, but I don't know, you probably know this, but I only found this out yesterday, that you share a birthday with a very great Pope.
Yes.
If you don't know, John Paul II's birthday is today.
And you also...
Yes.
Thank you very much.
And finally, thank you so much to Karen for doing so much work.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, everyone. A safe journey home.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry.
Hello.